Global warming activists contradicted by an early winter deep freeze. A bunch of global warmists sitting down in Antarctica, cooling themselves off a bit. We'll tell you what happened down there. Leading climate change scientist Ken Caldeira joins us to talk about it all. We're not going to talk just politics. We're going to talk science. Next. A Chinese rescue ship involved in the attempted rescue of more than 50 global warming scientists in Antarctica now it appears to need to be rescued itself. The crew on board the Chinese icebreaker saying they're worried about the ship's ability to move through the ice, so a nearby Australian icebreaker has been asked to stay in the area until it can be determined whether they're needed. And a new report that the federal government spent nearly $7.5 billion to help other nations deal with climate change. That report, covering the period 2010 through 2012, was submitted to the United Nations on a subject that Secretary of State John Kerry has described as a, quote, truly life and death challenge. But evidence is, however, lacking. In fact, tornado activity last year hit a 60-year low, even though climate alarmists insist global warming will increase tornadoes. And the United States last year broke more record cold temperatures than record hot temperatures. That's the first time that's happened in 2 decades. Here now to give us an assessment of what is actually happening with climate change is one of this country's leading climate scientists. He's Ken Caldeira, a climate scientist with the Carnegie Institution for Science at Stanford University. And Ken, it's great to have you with us. You know,
great to be here.
I think you probably find it as tedious as I do, maybe more so, all of the ideology and nonsense that's associated with climate change, public discussion, and public policy. But what are we faced with right now as we begin 2014? We have got record low incidence of tornadoes. We had no major Atlantic hurricanes whatsoever last year. What is happening here? Globally, 15 years we've had global warming in abeyance.
Yes, I mean, global warming has plateaued for the last 15 years, but as you just pointed out, 19 out of the last 20 years, we've had more record high temperatures in the United States than record lows. And so there's a lot of natural variability. We all know that weather changes from day to day, from week to week. The Earth has only heated about 1 degree Fahrenheit over the last century. And with this cold spell, we're seeing temperatures that are 30 degrees below normal. And so maybe it might have been 31 degrees below normal if it weren't for global warming. But at any one place, right, still today, the natural weather is more powerful than global warming.
Well, now, you associated yourself with a letter in which you called on leaders to embrace nuclear power because you're concerned, obviously, about global warming. Now, I will tell you, to be upfront with you, I'm one of those who is very concerned about nuclear power because I don't think we have adequate answers about what to do with the byproduct of fission. Your thinking, your thoughts on nuclear power and why you think that's so critical given the direction of our climate.
We can all differ about values and what we think is important, but I think we should try to agree on facts. And I think the science of climate change, the basic science, is fairly well established. And if we look at nuclear power, the facts about the objective risks are also fairly well established, and that nuclear power seems far less risky than coal. And yes, there are risks. We've seen Fukushima, and we know that there's waste disposal issues, but there's nothing fundamental about nuclear power that says that it can't be substantially safer than what we're currently doing.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the issue of nuclear power itself, other than to say Fukushima, as you put it, aside here. I mean, that we don't even know the true extent of that disaster and its impact. You would agree with that, right?
I would agree with that. I mean, I think Fukushima shows us that the current generation and our current way of operating nuclear power plants is dangerous, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because something is error-prone today doesn't mean we can't make it better.
To that end, error-prone, the science that has made judgments over the course of the past 3 decades about whether this planet is cooling or whether it is warming, we have seen, actually 40 years, we've seen both extremes, if you will, about concerns about climate change itself. What is your best scientific judgment as to what we can expect? We know that we have a solar minimum that is extending. We have watched our star, its polarity reverse. We have not begun the traditional, we have not begun to see the traditional effects of that 22-year cycle. Will that solar minimum, if it remains a minimum, contribute to cooling, or will it have any effect on our climate?
We know that Venus is hot because it's got an atmosphere full of carbon dioxide, and we know that Mars is cold because it doesn't have much carbon dioxide in its atmosphere. And so we know that more carbon dioxide heats up the planet. We also know that the natural climate system is very variable and goes through all kinds of cycles. But laid on top of all these cycles is going to be a long-term warming trend. And you can see the smart money already taking advantage of this and looking into mining opportunities in the Arctic, where it was formerly ice-covered.
Right.
And so I think we need to understand that the science is basically right and then decide what to do.
All right. Well, this cycle of science, can we leave it at that, Ken?
No,
Ken Caldera,
no,
I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it at that. It hasn't changed
in the last 30 years.
Okay. Well, but if we go back to 1970, the fear then was, of course, global cooling. Ken Caldera,
among
it's
a few
great
people.
I'm sorry? Among who?
No, the vast consensus is that there's been global warming. This basic science has been well understood since the 1960s.
Absolutely, and we'll have to leave it to another day as to why Time magazine led with its cover on, of course, global cooling. Ken, good to have you with us. Thanks so much. Up next, and I said we weren't going to get into politics. I lied. I apologize. Up next.